Good evening from Boston College. My name is Tara Pisani-Garo. I'm an associate professor of the practice in the Department of Earth Environmental Sciences, and I direct the Environmental Studies program. My area of expertise is in agroecology and sustainable agriculture. I welcome you to the show at 6, BC and the Common Good. The show at 6 features friends and members of the BC community discussing a range of issues affecting our world today. Topics include how the BC community is responding to the effects of COVID-19, to the enduring challenges of the marginalized, to our own resiliency and solidarity, and to the upbuilding of human dignity throughout the world. The show is based on the central insight of the common good. That is, that the resources that humanity has and needs must be shared equitably. Tonight's show is on food insecurity. Access to healthy food is a common good that provides us with nourishment to be productive people. Eating a delicious meal is one of the great joys of being human. And sharing a meal with our family, friends, and neighbors is a common act to connect us, to celebrate culture and diversity, and to show one another forgiveness and gratitude. Now, before we get started, let me say how you, the audience, can participate. At 6:40, my co-host and I will begin to ask our guests questions from the audience. You can pose a question before 6:40 using the Q&A button at the bottom of the screen. Please identify yourself by name and your relationship to Boston College. Now, please meet my co-host, Evie Satterfield, who just graduated from BC this spring with a degree in neuroscience. While at BC, Evie was a member of the Presidential Scholars Program, served as the president of the BC chapter of Real Food, and the president of NeuroSci, the National Honor Society in Neuroscience. Evie was also a student ambassador of the Catholic Relief Services, a trip leader with Outdoor Ventures, and a member of the Sustainability Action Committee. A very busy woman for 4 years at BC. Last summer, Evie worked at the Boston Consulting Group in Seattle on global health casework for the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. She'll be returning full-time in the fall. Now, tonight's show at 6 features 3 extraordinary women whose work on getting healthy food to essential workers fighting COVID-19, marginalized populations in Boston, and hungry children around the world will inspire you. Our first panelist this evening is Naven Salem. Tackling malnutrition became Naven Salem's lifelong mission in 2007 after visiting Tanzania, her father's birthplace, when she heard the unbearable cries of a mother who had lost her child to malnutrition. Determined to expand the reach of life-saving, portable, and shelf-stable food packets globally, 2 years later, she founded Adesia, a nonprofit social enterprise on a mission to help treat and prevent malnutrition in the world's most vulnerable populations. Her efforts have since helped transform the lives of over 11 million malnourished children across more than 55 countries, including the United States, in partnership with UNICEF, the World Food Program, USAID, and the USDA. She and her dedicated team of over 100 employees, many of whom are former refugees, share the belief that all children, no matter where they're from, deserve nutritious food to survive and thrive. A graduate of Boston College in 1994, Salem has been recognized with many awards, including the Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year for New England in 2018, New England's Council New Englander of the Year in 2017, the Henry Crown Fellow by the Aspen Institute in 2014, and Roger E. Joseph Prize by the Hebrew Union College. She was awarded 2 honorary degrees, a Doctor of Social Science from Boston College in 2012, and an honorary Doctor of Business Administration from Curry College in 2018. She's also a member of the Boston College Board of Trustees. A native New Englander, she lives in Barrington, Rhode Island, with her husband and 4 daughters. Welcome to the show at 6, Naven.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Evie.
This is Mary Lou Boza. Mary Lou is a 3rd generation Boston College Eagle. She's from the class of 2003 and has served since 2014 as the Director of Development at Haley House, a Boston nonprofit with a mission, Food with Purpose. Founded in the Catholic worker tradition, today Haley House operates a soup kitchen, affordable housing, and urban farm, a social enterprise restaurant, and Take Back the Kitchen, a cooking program for youth and families. Previously, Mary Lou was a campus minister, teacher, and youth minister after studying theology and Hispanic studies at Boston College and receiving a Master's of Divinity from Yale Divinity School. Mary Lou is also a founding board member of Faith in Action with El Salvador, a nonprofit supporting grassroots work in El Salvador, where she lived and worked. This past semester, Mary Lou was delighted to be back on campus to co-teach Leading for Social Impact, the senior capstone course of the Managing for Social Impact minor in CSOM that I had the pleasure to take. Welcome, Mary Lou.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Our final panelist is Lori Nahal. Lori Nahal graduated from Boston College in 2018, where she majored in biology and international studies with a concentration in global health. As a student, Lori worked in the microbiology lab and as an intern for the Boston College Center for Human Rights and International Justice. After graduation, she completed a Fulbright grant in northeastern Malaysia. Back in the United States, Lori and her colleagues from Fulbright Malaysia saw the toll COVID-19 was having on their local communities and decided to act. They designed the grassroots nonprofit Feed the Frontline to create a twofold impact from every dollar donated. The organization economically supports local family-owned restaurants through large meal orders and donates those meals to provide much-needed community support and nourishment to essential workers in vulnerable communities. Lori currently serves as the president of Feed the Frontline Chicago and works closely with her team and community members to coordinate local deliveries. Lori will be beginning graduate school this fall to pursue a master's of public health. Welcome, Lori.
Thanks, Evie. Excited to be here.
And to begin, I just wanted to introduce the concept of food insecurity. The USDA defines food insecurity as a household-level economic and social condition of limited or uncertain access to adequate nutrition. Adequate nutrition is widely recognized as an essential element in one's ability to lead a healthy and productive life. However, 1 out of every 10 US households suffer from food insecurity. Mary Lou, I'll turn it to you first. Can you paint a picture for us of what food insecurity looks like in the United States?
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm looking at the same figures as you, Evie, just to help paint the picture. In the latest numbers, pre-COVID, more than 37 million people in the US struggled with hunger. In Massachusetts, that looks like 1 in 11 Massachusetts residents. Due to coronavirus, and we'll talk a little bit more later about that, that's gone up about 60%, up to 54 million people they predict will experience food insecurity during this year. This is something that affects every community in the country. I'm most familiar with how that affects the Boston community, but like most other things, it's interconnected with all of the other problems that people face. So if people have trouble with finding meaningful, just employment, they have trouble providing nutritious food for their families. Households with children are much more likely to face food insecurity. And I think especially devastating in our current climate, African-American households are more than twice as likely than white non-Hispanic households to experience food insecurity, and 1 in 4 African-American children, compared to 1 in 9 children overall, experience food insecurity in the US. I think compounding that fact is the fact that food waste is an unbelievable problem in the US, and up to 30 to 40% of food in the US is wasted every year, and that compounds globally as well.
Absolutely. Just as you touched on, this is not just a domestic issue, but also a global one. However, the prevalence of people who are undernourished has declined globally from 14.8% in 2000 to 10.8% in 2018. But the rates of undernourishment have increased in sub-Saharan Africa in recent years, which the United Nations attributes to conflict-affected countries and climate-related factors. Even, I'm going to turn it to you. What does food insecurity look like in a developing or war-torn country?
Yeah, first of all, I'm so impressed that all of you have tuned in on a Friday night, and I hate to ruin your evening with all of these tough topics to talk about. So food insecurity in the developing world looks very different. And my organization, Adicia, works in countries like South Sudan and Yemen and Syria and Venezuela. So as you mentioned, Evie, these are countries that are dealing with a combination of war and climate change at the same time. And the result of that is large populations on the move, refugee populations. And so those are usually the people that become most vulnerable to becoming severely malnourished. And so what does that look like? So if I'm in a clinic in Chad, when a mother walks several hours to get to the clinic, the child comes in on day 1, and they are conserving all of their energy to let their heart keep beating. And so they often don't have the energy to hold up their head, to be able to sit up, to even cry, because all of that energy is conserved to trying to stay alive. And so we are able to give them a fortified peanut butter that is able to take them out of that state. And I remember one day very clearly where I'm seeing a mother bringing in a child on day 1, and seeming very hopeless and distraught at the situation of her child, but then looking on the other side of the clinic at a child that 6 weeks later had been through this whole program. And this child is running around like a 2-year-old should. And so not only do we want to deliver food to children, but also the essential micronutrients to help build those brains. Because without that intervention during that critical window of opportunity when the brain is developing, this needs to be something that we intervene with for lifelong results. So first, we want to be able to keep children alive, but then we also want them to thrive and be able to be productive members of their community. And so in those clinics, we will see thousands of children lining up every single day who are in need of these very specialized foods to help treat their malnutrition.
Absolutely. And on an individual level, you spoke to the effects that malnutrition can have. What are the effects at a country level?
Yeah, I mean, for sure, at the country level, I mean, we're also seeing these numbers rise like they are in the United States. I mean, in the New York Times this morning, they reported that they expect 250 million people in developing countries to be acutely hungry. And so this is an entire generation. All of the progress that we've made over the last decade, much of it has been erased or will be erased within, by the end of 2020. And so we're impacting the ability of an entire generation to be able to attend school and to be able to do basic things like that. And they expect the World Food Program, the head of the World Food Program is expecting on average up to 200,000 to 300,000 children who will die every single day for a 90-day period, every single day. Like I had to listen to that statistic a couple times to actually try and get my head around this. The numbers are really hard to process, even from someone who goes to visit countries like this all the time. Even for me, it's really tough to process that numbers. And what are we going to be able to do about it? Especially as a country like the United States, where we depend on funding to come from here, when we're very concerned, rightly so, with our own concerns about coronavirus and other things going on here. How much more can we take on? But at the same time, we're about to watch several countries go into a state of famine, meaning over 30% of children will die from hunger.
Thank you for that.
David, can I jump in really fast? Just where is the supply chain? Are the peanuts coming from the United States, from the South? Are they coming internationally? And are you concerned about climate change, like in making the packets of the future?
Yeah, so I mean, we operate out of the United States. We're in Providence, Rhode Island. So we purchase all of our raw materials locally within the United States. So yes, peanuts from the South. But we also have partnered with many factories that are working locally. So in malnutrition hotspots like Niger, Ethiopia, India, Haiti, et cetera. And we all work together so that they're using their raw materials from their countries or their regions as well. So trying to spread it out so that there's multiple supply chains to make sure that we are always there for UNICEF and World Food Program, and be able to respond as inexpensively and as quickly as possible, not displacing resources within a country if there are resources. So we want to only ship to places where there is not access to these foods. Otherwise, we're disrupting that economic system. So we're very conscious of that and work together with other international partners to make sure that's taken care of.
That's great. Lori, I know that you've done a bit of work addressing food insecurity in academic settings. And as I was completing my senior thesis this past spring, I actually looked into food insecurity on college campuses and found that it was a major issue that many people are not aware of. Can you paint a picture of what food insecurity looks like for college or high school students?
Yes, definitely. So first I want to applaud you because I think that topic was especially timely for your spring semester this year, as a lot of students were suddenly pulled off of their meal plans or other spaces where they were able to access food easily. Feed the Frontline Chicago particularly works on high school campuses where a lot of students are in similar situations of they're receiving food from their schools every day, and now as those schools are shutting down, they're not able to access those same meals. So that's a huge problem. I also think like food insecurity in general is such a fascinating issue, and I'm glad we're talking about it all together because it does have these different faces. So like you were saying, Naveen, extreme hunger in other countries, when we're looking at the US, it's going to be a lot different. And a lot of times the settings in college campuses, for example, are going ignored. So first of all, like we need a lot more research into the numbers. We do look at past studies that show around 40%, which is crazy, of college students being food insecure. And of course that number can rise depending on the type of higher education institution. Community colleges often show higher proportions. But what's important to recognize is that even well-funded organizations, educational institutions like Boston College, this is still a major issue there. So a lot of people will point to rising costs in tuition, which I'm sure a lot of us that are affiliated with colleges recognize, and other educational costs, while financial support through Pell Grants or other means are not increasing at the same rate. Students are unfortunately left to make impossible decisions in their day-to-day lives, which could be like paying for a class textbook and having to skip lunch to do so. And so these trade-offs are things that we don't want our students to be making, but this issue just isn't talked about. And I'm sure that's something that you came across in your research. And I feel like hopefully as an academic community and as a nation, we're gonna come together to gather more data on this so we can support our students to not be having to make those choices and making sure that they all have access.
I'm going to jump in too. Boston College is part of the Menus of Change University Research Collaborative, and this topic of food insecurity in college campuses is being discussed in that network. So it's happening across college campuses in the United States, and researchers are really at the beginning stages of trying to understand the problem and then also what solutions will work. Is it food pantries? Is it swiping it forward on your card? There's all sorts of different solutions, but we're really at the beginning stages of even understanding how to solve that problem on college campuses.
Yeah, definitely. I also think something I wanted to mention too is this culture around it, where it's not really as involved in the student body conversation. So a lot of times at places like Boston College, students aren't as comfortable talking about food insecurity, and people just assume that as a student at an expensive institution, you have the resources just to pay for food normally. And so when this is taken away and students are left without that, a lot of their friends and community members are surprised. So I'm excited that this is something that's happening both at an academic level, but also within people's social circles, I think is really important.
Great, and I think we're going to turn now to the topic of food justice.
Great, thank you so much. So we want to talk about this concept of food justice, which means in a very simple definition, communities exercising their right to grow, sell, and eat healthy and traditional food. Communities of color have been disproportionately deprived of food justice through systemic racism, including the dispossession of land for 98% of Black landowners, with the highest rates in the South, assimilation programs on the reservation system forced on Native Americans, poor working conditions and pay for Black and brown farm workers, and being more likely to live in neighborhoods without access to grocery stores that sell fresh produce. So to add to the statistics that have already been mentioned, according to the City of Boston's Food Access Agenda, which is available online, on average, 19% of Bostonians are at risk of being food insecure, and the rate goes up to 30% for Black residents and 38% for Haitian Creole speakers and Spanish speakers. So this is a big issue, and I think that we're seeing this. This has been around for a while. It's not something new. And I guess our question, we want to first start with the Haley House and ask you, Mary Lou, if you can talk about how Haley House is sort of working on this issue, or what sort of programs is the Haley House working on that kind of helps to bridge that gap and kind of bring communities of color, restore that food justice in those communities?
Sure, we're trying, but I don't think we're perfect. But as we were founded in 1966 as a soup kitchen, and I think food insecurity looked a lot different then. And we still operate a soup kitchen where we have all of our emergency meals. But in the late 1990s, one thing that the people running the soup kitchen noticed is that a lot of people were coming out of incarceration at much higher rates than previous. And so they began a bakery training program that was out of the South End Soup Kitchen for a little while in order to provide opportunities for job training, some funds for people, and employment. that expanded into Roxbury in 2005, and Roxbury is about a mile from our original location in the South End where our soup kitchen is. And it's a USDA food desert. And we opened a cafe there with the idea of providing healthy, affordable food, culturally appropriate, for the community, and a place to gather. And that's been around since 2005. It's very popular. We also try to provide employment opportunities for people with some sort of barriers to employment, so to help with economic empowerment as well as we're feeding the community. Out of that also grew the Take Back the Kitchen program, which is a cooking program for kids and families in order to help them to learn new techniques of cooking, especially on budgets, to be able to take control of their health in new ways. We've been involved with farming since 1983, originally out in rural Massachusetts, but about a decade ago, we transferred our farming efforts to the city. And so we have 2 plots. One is a small plot next to our soup kitchen that we operate with a BPS school. And the other is about an acre of land in Roxbury. So it's inside a neighborhood. We were invited to be on that land, and we are able to produce a lot of food for the neighborhood, but also invite people onto the land and to learn all about new techniques of completely organic biodynamic farming. And it's really cool to see the neighborhood sort of invest into that space and learn new techniques and be able to benefit from the delicious food that they're growing themselves.
Thank you so much.
And I just have a question that I wanted to open up for everyone. This is a complex question, but I'm wondering if you all can break down what drives the structural racism in the food system. It is obviously a very complex issue since food insecurity is so interconnected with housing issues and transportation and zoning laws. But if you all can just begin to give us a little bit more of understanding about that issue. Anyone can hop in.
I think as you said, Evie, oh,
Go ahead, Marina.
go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I was just going to say, no, I don't know if this isn't really addressing the root causes. Well, it is when you get into like zoning laws and things like that. So where we work in Chicago, it's one of the most segregated cities in the country. And it's not that way by chance, right? As many of us know, these are intentional policies that were in place to segregate Black and brown communities. So if you actually looked at the geography of Chicago, you'll have like an entirely Black neighborhood, entirely white neighborhood, and right in the middle, they put a Hispanic community to completely separate them. So what that ended up happening over time is food deserts. So places where, despite being in an inner city where there's a lot of businesses, these communities don't have access to cheap, healthy food. So in a lot of the communities that we work in the south and west sides of Chicago, where we're supporting local restaurants, a lot of grocery stores, especially over the past couple of weeks, the community might have one grocery store, and if it was looted or if something happened, suddenly those communities again have no access to resources and nothing there. So I think what you said with the boundaries and geographic separation of people, a lot of those communities are left without grocery stores or any access to food in this time, and it's exacerbated by COVID-19 as we're seeing in the communities we work in.
Yeah, and I think racism internationally looks a little bit different. We're looking even at skin tones. So if you think about a country like India, the darker your skin tone, the more likely you are to be in a lower class. And the more oppressed your class is, the less likely you are to be able to get, one of the good jobs or have opportunity. And that lack of opportunity then leads to greater risk of food insecurity. And so the lens, it looks a little different, but yes, there's still these problems existing in the areas internationally that we work as well.
I'll add something too, in that we are seeing this growth in the Dollar Tree stores, and very few of them have fresh produce. And the reason why is because fresh produce doesn't make grocery stores money, doesn't make the Dollar Tree stores money. So they're kind of kept low in supply in that. And so where the money is in all the processed food. And so when we're talking about food access, there are a lot of food choices out there, but they're not necessarily the healthy choices. And so we have another issue at hand in the United States in not getting the right type of nutrition. And so even in food deserts, we're seeing obesity problems. And then we layer on other health issues such as heart disease and stroke, et cetera. So it's complicated in the United States and where grocery stores get set up that have fresh produce. So there's some interesting initiatives working on corner markets and trying to get more fresh produce in the stores where kids are going to after school, and so that they're not getting Slim Jims, but are able to pick up a banana or an orange or something.
And this leads directly to the coronavirus,
Right.
where the people most likely to have symptoms and risk death are people with diabetes, with heart conditions and obesity, all of the things that you just mentioned. And so it's just, this cycle just keeps continuing to put the already at-risk populations at further risk.
Well, and that's, I think, a good segue for us to talk a little bit about the pandemic, which has really interrupted the ability of communities around the world to grow, distribute, sell, and eat nutritious food. The Boston Globe recently reported that food insecurity has increased by over 50% in Boston as a result of the pandemic. One of the reasons for that has been the closure of public schools. Over 30 million children in the United States participate in the National School Lunch Program and depend on those meals for their daily nutrition. To make matters worse, nonprofit organizations and small businesses who play a role in securing food for people have been hit hard economically, and U.S. food processing facilities became these hotspots for virus transmission, which caused shutdowns and some reduced supply of food, not everything, but like meat, for example, and cheese. So Lori, you took an idea about getting food from places that have it to people who need it at the most critical time. We'd love to hear your story on how you made that happen and how you transitioned so quickly and got a company going to do this.
Yeah, so I mean, it just started from looking around our community and identifying a need there, where we saw like local small businesses, restaurants struggling, and then also saw a lot of people, particularly essential frontline workers, who needed support. So we hooked up with some local mom and pop shop type places, and started to purchase large meal orders from them. And then at the beginning, just a few organizers would just drive those meals to essential workers. But as an organization that has been developed to respond to the pandemic, something that was really important to us as we developed the company and started bringing more people on board was to make sure that we also adapted our mission to best serve our community as the pandemic changed. So we really thought about what it means to be on the front line. And kind of going back to that idea of racial justice, we also recognize that COVID-19, like we're just talking about, is disproportionately affecting people of color, low-income neighborhoods. So, and those people who are in those neighborhoods are on the front line. So we really tried to, in developing this company, be flexible and kind of change our mission as we went along to not only support frontline workers with those meals, but also making sure that meals are getting to communities who could really use them. Families, students are out of school, all of those populations, and really just leveraging our network. All of us that work on the project in a particular city come from that city. So building up our model based on a local community that we're familiar with has been really helpful. And just engaging and talking to people in the community and hearing about the businesses that they want to support has been great. And yeah, it's been a really incredible journey to see the community resilience at this time.
Thank you so much. You're doing incredible work, and you can tell it's the people on the front lines, but also it's the small businesses that are trying to stay afloat during this really challenging time. So thank you for making those connections for people. Mary Lou, we want to ask you, how has COVID-19 affected the Haley House's priorities and funding sources, the distribution chain? We've been hearing a lot about food pantries. There was a fear that food pantries would run out, and now there's having to spend a lot more money to keep the shelves stocked. So can you tell us how things have affected Haley House in your work?
Yeah, pretty quickly we adjusted our priorities. We realized that we needed to focus on the people who are most vulnerable in our community. And so our soup kitchen usually is a dine-in place, and we really emphasize relationship and sharing meals. Obviously, we had to change that. So we switched to takeout meals, and we've about doubled our meal count this since COVID, and that's stayed up at those levels. So we're serving about like 12 to 1,500 meals a week takeout. And we also have really seen an increase in people needing food from our food pantry. We also have just completely removed all barriers to entrance. And so anybody who comes to the door hungry is given food. And so we've seen a different population. A lot of our guests spend some time at shelters, and a lot of the ones that we're seeing right now are choosing to stay outside, especially with the warmer weather, because being in a shelter is so risky. Even though the shelters have done a really, really good job of trying to care for their guests. Another piece of our puzzle is that our social enterprise had just relaunched about 6 weeks before the pandemic. And so we were lucky enough to be able to access the PPP. Is that right? Not PPE, PPP funds. And so we were able to keep all of our staff on payroll during this time. But as we look at the next few months and how reopening will look, we'll have to reevaluate some of that. But some of the people that we've been training in our cafe in order to give them better jobs and to give them skills, they've been obviously among the most affected. A lot of them have children and haven't been able to find other work. Our farm, on the other hand, has really flourished because it has had such a focus on being sustainable and using sustainable farming practices. And so they make their own compost, they save their own seeds. And so as a result, it's really become a real source of hope for all of us, and especially for the neighbors who are flocking to the place and trying to stay socially distanced, but it's a really special resource for the people who live around the farm.
That's amazing. Naven, I want to ask you too, Adicia pivoted during the pandemic to include the United States among its countries that they're serving. So how does addressing food insecurity in the US compare to addressing it in low and middle income countries? What sort of barriers are you coming against?
Yeah, I mean, first, we had to keep our factory safe, right? On day one is like, how do we keep all of our 100 workers safe and running? Because we started to see other factories starting to close down, right? And interruptions in the food supply chain. And we were trying to really look into the future and say, like, what else is going to happen here in the United States? And at that time, if we can remember 2 whole months back, like every week was a complete newsflash, and every week was completely different than the week prior. And so we're trying to look into the future and say, what is going to happen next here in the United States? And we thought, maybe these lines at food banks are going to grow. And maybe there's going to be interruptions to our own food supply. We don't know. You remember going to the grocery store and you're not sure if it's going to be full of everything you need or completely empty. And the news tries to scare you and things like that. And so we said, you know what, let's take a chance. And let's make a new product. It's not super innovative. It's peanut butter, but normally we make this highly fortified peanut butter and these very specialized things for very specialized situations. But we're like, it's the United States. We love peanut butter, but we need a cheap version of it to be that single serve, ready to eat, shelf stable, and easy to distribute in food banks and things like that. So in about 5 minutes, we made this. I called it love because that was the first word that came to mind. And we made this packaging, and we tried to figure out if we could make this product in about a week. And we made it, and we said, maybe this will never be needed here. We just don't know, but let's have it just in case. And because we said, we really want our 55th country to be the United States of America. And we want to be able to contribute here at home as well. It's very important to us. And so, believe it or not, the USDA came out with a tender, which we bid on. And we won. We beat out all of the normal competitors that are in that space. And it was specifically designed for COVID-19 emergency response in the United States. And I have to say, it completely energized the team to work on a new project, to be given a very short timeline to be able to create this, to bid on something, jump through a million hoops, make it possible. And then now this is being distributed to the entire West Coast and a lot of New York, Massachusetts, Rhode Island, Connecticut in our little home base here, where we are at the epicenter, and we wanted to be able to help here. So we have been distributing this through school systems, through food banks, through refugee centers, through frontline workers, like everything that you can think of, we've been distributing. And so it's been a really great experience for everybody to say, how can we hustle? How can we pivot? How can we respond to what's in front of us right now? And how can we make a difference here and being supportive of our own neighbors in the US?
That's wonderful. Thank you so much. Evie, I think we have a couple minutes before we get to our audience questions. Do you want to take it over and talk about some of our action?
Sure. As I'm sure many people in the BC community are wondering, I wanted to kind of turn to talking about tangible actions that we can all take to address this issue in each of our own community. Lori, I wanted to start with you because your work has demonstrated the role of innovation and entrepreneurship in addressing food insecurity. You talked about this earlier a bit, but in particular, what do you think that college campuses can do, even our own Boston College can do to ensure that students have the proper nutrition to learn and excel?
Yeah, so I think one of the most important things is that this is always going to be a choice, an individual's choice. So a university, any organization is not going to tell someone what they can and cannot eat. But what a university is particularly able to do is give people the education to make those decisions for themselves. So I think one part of this is just making sure that these conversations around food security, around nutrition, are happening both in informal and formal settings. And I think Boston College actually does a really good job of unique coursework and interdisciplinary courses where there really is an opportunity to educate about nutrition and consumer choices in general. I think the other element of this choice is that we don't want any of our students to be making choices based on factors like cost. So we need to make sure that all options, healthy options, nutritious options, are available for the same prices as, or cheaper than those less nutritious options. So I think like having the conversation and focusing on making sure that those choices are available to all of our students are important.
And Mary Lou, Haley House is located in Boston, so accessible for many students. How can students engage with the organization?
Students have been engaging with, from BC, have been engaging with Haley House since our founding. So we rely usually on dozens of volunteers from BC every year, especially through the Pulse program and the Presidential Scholars Program, which Evie and I were both a part of. That's how I originally got connected to Haley House. So there's a lot of opportunities to come volunteer in our soup kitchen and help to serve the food. All of our food is made from scratch. It's very creative, and all of it's served normally, not during COVID, but in a communal setting, and volunteers are expected to spend time with our guests, and guests help to make the meals. So I would encourage people to volunteer there, volunteer with our cooking classes. We had an initiative for a little while where our chocolate chip cookies from our cafe, which are really delicious, were being sold at BC as a way of raising funds for our transitional employment program for people coming out of incarceration. So we hope to restart that. So hopefully students can help us with advocacy towards that. We always welcome volunteers and collaborations from students.
I think we can turn it now to questions from the audience.
Oh, great. So we had a question too for Nabin, and I think it relates to this question that's anonymous. It says, Adicia is not a nonprofit or an NGO. What was behind your decision to run Adicia as a traditional business with a societal mission? Do you have advantages that traditional nonprofits don't have?
So we are actually a 501c3, so we are a nonprofit, but we operate really more as a social enterprise. And so what that means is 95% of our business is selling products to UNICEF, the World Food Program, and USAID. And then 5% is very traditional fundraising. And so what we're doing with that money, so I need to raise about $2 to $3 million a year. And we're using that money specifically for organizations that fall out of the United Nations system. So it could be, we work directly with the Ministry of Health in Sierra Leone. Why? Because there's a smaller need there. There's still hundreds of kids, but there's not thousands of kids. So it's something that is dropped by UNICEF because they can't handle everything. And so we try to fill those gaps and use our donations to fund those programs. So we do that in about 8 countries, and then the rest of them are all through the social enterprise model. That allows us to be scalable. So we are making about 1.5 million of these packets per day. And, because the need is enormous. So, in order to run 24 hours a day, in order to have low costs and be able to reach more kids, it's important to have this scale. ensure that we're able to reach really large scale crises, but then also not forget about the smaller ones by using our nonprofit model. So this hybrid works really well to be able to address all of the requests that we are taking at the office.
Our next question comes from Carmen Helm, a Boston College Environmental Studies major. Carmen asks, how does climate change inform your organization's plan for the future? And anyone can hop in on this.
I mean, climate change for us is critical. I mean, we see the drought situation right now. We've got locusts. Like, people are kind of, you know, like, what else can happen in this world of biblical proportions? Well, the locusts we're in Ethiopia and East Africa. They're moving to India. Like, the droughts are record breaking every single year, and so, you know, we're displacing millions and millions of people as a result of climate change. People looking for safety, but also for land that they can continue to farm and produce their own food. So it's detrimental in all of the countries that we work in.
We have a question from Sebastian, who's an incoming Boston College undergrad. And Sebastian asks, I'm very interested in public health and food insecurity. What are ways that I can get involved with working on food insecurity projects as a student at Boston College? So Evie, you may even want to jump in on this question too, because I know you've done a lot of work on it too.
Absolutely. I'll just jump in with a quick plug for Real Food, the food justice organization on campus. We have a campus garden, and we really try to strive for like food justice in the local community. We also do a lot of cooking classes, so that's a fun part of it too. But then getting involved with professors like Tara or other professors in the environmental studies or sociology departments is a great way to get involved in research.
There's also a sustainability interns program with BC Dining. So there's a pretty big group of students who work on sustainability in the dining system. So I'd encourage you, Sebastian, to put in an inquiry there and apply. Any other insights since you are all BC grads, were you working on these topics when you were an undergrad?
Nope.
We're both a long time.
You know, I would say go out and volunteer. You know, I mean, that's how I learn about things. Like, I don't have a lot of experience with the food insecurity topic in the United States. So I drove to New York and started to ask questions and wander around and show up at places and see the differences, even in different parts of New York, what's going on. And don't be afraid to just go out there and offer your services. Because we all have a lot of talents as Boston College students and graduates to get out there and offer to help. I think it's really important, especially during times like this, but really in everything. And, you know, that's what we stand for at BC, right? That's some of my best memories is, you know, doing, you know, building houses on spring break, you know, and things like that. That concept of service, like, now is the time when organizations need you to volunteer your time and go and be curious and ask questions and see if there's a way to do things better. Like, now we have lines at food pantries and food banks. This is not okay. This is not dignity for people, right? Now that we have this huge scale up, what are we going to do about it? How are we going to address the needs of where you might have been serving 200 people, you're now serving 10,000? Well, something has to change there. And so maybe someone new who doesn't have that much experience can go in and look at something and say, I have a great idea. This is, maybe we can change this so that we are able to save 10,000 and it's not taking up 11 city blocks to be able to serve these people and have them wait with their little kids for hours and hours on end. So you come with a fresh lens, use that and use your energy to go out and see how you can make the system better.
Our next question is coming from Giovanna Igner, a rising sophomore at BC. Giovanna asks, what changes would you like to see in how food is produced and distributed, both domestically and internationally, after the pandemic?
I just hope there is food distributed after the pandemic. I mean, we just internationally, we just need food of any sort because lives are at stake. So that is my only hope, is that we can pay attention to all of these crises simultaneously. Even though it's hard, we have to remember the rest of the world as well.
Mary Lou, you brought up a really interesting point earlier about food waste. The United States has 40% food waste. USDA has been working really hard on this issue. And I think that even during the pandemic, in households where we see the greatest food waste, people are getting thriftier because they don't want to go out to the grocery store and expose themselves to COVID-19, right? So maybe that will stick past the pandemic, but I'm curious, are you seeing improvements in the way we're managing food waste? Because it seems like we're getting better at it, but through waste tracking in dining halls and getting leftovers to food pantries, do you see that getting better?
I see some of it getting better, and I see organizations like Love and Spoonfuls, which is another great Boston organization that rescues food from across the city, especially from grocery stores. There's another organization called Daily Table, which uses ingredients from grocery stores that are about to go bad and makes new dishes for people to buy at lower prices in food deserts. I think managing the waste that already exists is one part of it, and then I think for us personally to make better choices and to try to I see another one of the questions is about eating locally, and I do think that sort of concentrating on keeping your own footprint small and helping to encourage others in your community to do the same hopefully will adjust some of the imbalance that we see, because it's so heartbreaking to know that Naveen's seeing around the world this kind of malnutrition, and there is so much waste in the U.S. In households, and then also even in the food banks. I think I saw a lot of the reports about having trouble getting food, but we haven't had any trouble getting enough food. There has been enough food for people to eat. But I think going back to the idea of people's dignity, it's much better if people can afford to feed themselves. And so this is so connected to other issues of economic justice and poverty that it's very hard to take these apart. So the answer is not just giving people free food, but it's about changing the system so that people can provide for themselves. And so I think concentrating on just food is not the answer. It's a big piece of it. Solving that immediate need is important, but also the big picture of helping to bring people to levels of dignity.
Yeah, I also wanted to add from, like a restaurant standpoint. So a lot of our restaurants are also having to deal with this problem of excess food, right? Especially as fewer people are buying food and are trying to keep their menus diverse. So a lot of restaurants are adapting in really cool ways of making fewer items on their menu so that they're not having to throw away as much food in general, which I think is really important. And then also, like, as a consumer, I think some of our choices are changing and restaurant supply chains are changing, with meats being higher priced in this country due to like outbreaks at production centers. So restaurants are moving toward fewer meat options or being creative with their food items, which I think is hopefully a positive change that can continue moving forward, which of course also goes back to climate change and our meat production in this country.
Thank you so much. That is really great to hear. So we have a question from Mary Ann Hinsdale, a professor at BC who teaches a course called Theology and Ecology. And she has two questions. One is, she has students who are very interested in food insecurity and food justice issues. Can you recommend any readings, podcasts, speakers on this issue? And then her other question is, are there any gender issues in this topic? You're all women. Would you say that most people involved in food security are women? It is interesting. Or what role do women play in this solving food insecurity? Anyone can answer any of those questions. Thank you, Marianne.
I think it falls on women globally to feed their families. So it's an area of interest, I suppose. I'm always hungry, so that's why I'm in this space, and food near me at all times. But I mean, at least in developing countries, I would say that the women are the primary caregivers and responsible for feeding their families. And so as a mother, I, felt that pain and got involved in this issue to try to make life for other mothers globally just a little bit easier.
I wish I could offer more on the resources, but let me know if other people have them, because I just joined this guild and it's so fascinating. There's a lot out there. I don't know.
And nothing's coming to mind for maybe Tara or Evie. No.
This one. This is Fair Food by Orrin Hesterman. I use this book in sustainable agriculture, and my students give it the thumbs up, I think. So I would recommend that. It's a really great summer read. Oh, and for those who are interested in land dispossession, land justice, lots of independent chapters in this topic, and really getting into racial disparities in land ownership, which is just a huge issue. We haven't really gone there in this conversation, but the ability to own land and grow food, and that process of dispossession really happened starting in the 1950s. So those are just two resources off the top of my desk. We only have a couple minutes left. One question that we wanted to ask everyone, Naven, you brought up food, and certainly people during this pandemic have been using food as a way to accompany their families and the frontline workers through this pandemic, and are kind of reacquainting themselves with the kitchen, dusting off the bread pans, me included. And so I guess our last question for all of you is, what are you preparing in your kitchen? And, do you want to share with us any sort of special food stories during this time?
I would say it's definitely more exhausting to feed 4 children plus a 5th boyfriend that showed up at our house than feeding 3 million people around the world. Like, it's definitely a lot of work. And so I got out every cookbook and Google recipe that I could find to try and make something different as many nights in a row as I could. I finally got exhausted and quit, but I did pretty well for a number of weeks. And so, we mix things up. I have a friend who runs a fish company, and so we did a lot of fish. So tuna poke bowls were a family favorite for sure, because you could make all kinds of different sides to go along with it. And then pulling out the grill to grill like any type of fish and vegetables was something we spent a lot of time eating. But we ate literally everything that I could dream up over a 3-month period, and then I quit and started making the kids cook.
Great.
So I, after coming home from Malaysia in the winter, became a vegetarian for the first time in my life. So our quarantine project has been going back through the cookbooks and replacing every meal with a vegetarian equivalent and finding the replacements for that. So also looking for new recipes if anyone has them.
I would say that I'm really lucky and have been eating really well. My husband and I live next door to my brother and his wife and his kids, and my mother's living with us and a friend of ours from El Salvador. So we've had, my husband's Chinese, my sister-in-law's Lebanese, we're Italian and Irish, and we have a Salvadoran. So we've had amazing food. And I think one thing that I've appreciated is the creativity that we had to use because of the, sometimes, I mean, I won't complain. We can get most ingredients, but you go to the store and there's not as many fresh vegetables. So finding new ways to find nutrition and deliciousness has been fun. We did make donuts on Easter, and they were awesome from scratch. That was one of the best.
Wonderful. Evie, what about you?
I think more than anything, we've just been using things from the garden more. It's been really fun. It's like, what's seasonal, what's fresh today, and then designing a recipe out of that, which has been really fun.
I made bread. I uncovered my Kripalo cookbook that I used a lot pre having children. And so I got into making bread that takes like 3 hours, and I did several of those loaves until I was like, okay, I think I need to stop. But the other thing that was sort of interesting to see my kids get into baking. So I've got a high schooler and a middle schooler and an elementary schooler, and they've all been in the kitchen baking. They made chocolate eclairs. They were delicious without any help from us. So I do think this time period is getting more people acquainted with cooking and finding the love of food and how it connects us together as people.
And as dinner's right around the corner, I just want to thank all of the panelists for a wonderful discussion about this really important issue. The work each of you will do in your organizations is inspiring and uplifting, I'm sure, to the audience as well as myself, even in these challenging times. I also want to thank my co-host Tara. It's been a pleasure to work with you on this and over the past 4 years with Real Food. For all of those watching, the next segment in the series is next Tuesday evening, June 16th from 6 to 7 once again. And that segment will be discussing US political life and the common good. The segment will feature Ambassador Nicholas Burns, Boston College trustee and Goodman Family Professor of the Practice of Diplomacy and International Relations at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government. And just as a reminder, you need to register for each segment you want to attend, just like you did for this one, and you can do that at the website. Thank you all for attending this evening, and I hope you stay well and safe, and good night from Boston College.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One.